My mom once said, "Medics? They just wipe blood off real heroes. Don't act like that's bravery." She said it casually, slicing butternut squash at the kitchen counter like she was talking about the weather. I didn't respond, not because I had nothing to say, but because if I opened my mouth, I might shatter. I'd just come back from my third deployment in Iraq. Still had desert sand in my boots. A 7-year-old girl was alive today because I held her arteries shut for 3 straight hours under enemy fire. But in this house, that didn't matter. Here, I was still the daughter who refused to wear heels, didn't settle down, didn't give them a grandson. My name is Jordan Reyes. I'm 37. I used to be a combat medic in the U.S. Army. Now I teach trauma response at Walter Reed. But long before the Pentagon ever asked me to speak, my mother once asked me, quietly, at a wedding, if I could just step out of the family photo for symmetry. So if you've ever been made to feel like you didn't belong in your own story, this one's for you. The driveway still had that same crack from when I was 10, the one my brother tripped over and blamed on me. The porch light flickered like a warning, and that "bless this mess" doormat, still there, like the universe had a sense of humor. I parked on the street, didn't want to block Derek's brand new Escalade. As I stepped out, my boots hit the pavement with that familiar, heavy thud. The Texas air was crisp, but the cold that slid into my sleeves had nothing to do with the weather. I knocked, not because I had to, but because I knew they needed time. Time to sigh, time to say, "Let's just be polite." Dad opened the door, eyes dropped straight to my uniform. "You're not in combat anymore. You can wear regular clothes, you know." No hi. No, "How was the drive?" Inside smelled like cinnamon rolls and passive judgment. Mom hugged me like someone touching wet laundry, arms stiff, smile tighter. "You're early," she muttered. Derek walked in, 6 feet of business casual smug, clapped me on the shoulder like I was his assistant. "Still playing Army girl, huh?" I sat at the dinner table right next to an empty seat. Name card read, Sergeant J. Reyes, not Jordan, not daughter. Just rank, like they couldn't remember the rest. Dinner was turkey and awkward silence. Every time I spoke, someone talked over me. Derek shared about his latest fintech startup. Mom talked about her Pilates instructor. Dad explained for the 6th time how he met a retired senator at the golf club. I tried to talk about a girl I saved in Mosul. She was 7, both parents gone. I carried her 2 miles in the dark with shrapnel in her ribs and blood soaking through my vest. Before I even got to the explosion, Mom coughed. "Let's not talk about bombs at the dinner table, Jordan. It's Thanksgiving." And just like that, I stopped. Even the cranberry sauce felt like it was judging me. Later that night, I stood alone in the backyard, staring up at stars too faint to see, wondering why I kept coming back to a house that never felt like mine. I didn't grow up poor. I grew up invisible. We had the 2-story house, the white fence, and a golden retriever named Rusty, who never listened to anyone. We had casserole Tuesdays and family pictures and matching sweaters. What we didn't have was space for more than one bright future. And that spotlight? It belonged to Derek the moment he threw a perfect spiral in 3rd grade. Quarterback by freshman year. Homecoming king. Early acceptance to Stanford. Even the UPS guy called him the pride of Oak Ridge. And me? I was the girl who sat in the library corner with anatomy books while other girls practiced their cheer routines. I took apart radios. I memorized bone structures instead of makeup tutorials. I told my parents once, just once, that I wanted to be a field medic. Dad laughed. Mom blinked. "You mean like a nurse?" "No," I said, full of teenage fire. "Like a combat medic?" "I want to serve. I want to save people." She looked at me the way you look at a kid who says they want to be an astronaut clown. "Have you thought about cosmetology school instead?" From that day on, every conversation became a subtle correction. Don't waste your looks. Who's gonna marry someone who gets shot at for a living? You're being dramatic, Jordan. But it wasn't drama. It was clarity. So I made a decision. On my 18th birthday, I enlisted. No big speech, no family dinner. Just a printed application left on the kitchen table and a bedroom stripped clean. Mom didn't call. Dad didn't ask. Derek sent me a 2-word text. Why though? And yet, I didn't cry. Not in boot camp, when my legs gave out and my bunkmates threw up beside me. Not in trauma training, when I had to shove my hand into a simulation chest wound while a soldier screamed in my face. Not even the first time I heard real gunfire crack across a desert I couldn't pronounce. Because every time I thought about quitting, I thought about that dinner table, those polite smiles, and a name card that didn't even bother to call me Jordan, and I reminded myself, if I cried now, they'd win. It was my second deployment in Afghanistan. We were embedded with a NATO convoy clearing a route that had been ambushed 2 nights before. Intel was shaky, comms unreliable. Locals were fleeing. Every shadow felt like it had teeth. I wasn't leading the unit, but I was the only one who'd treated more than 10 field injuries under active fire. Which meant when things went sideways, all eyes came to me, and they did go sideways, fast. A civilian vehicle took a wrong turn and drove straight into the hot zone. First explosion took out the lead Humvee. Second one tore through a market stall across the street, flames screaming, metal in the air like shrapnel confetti. Our comms officer was already down. Our lieutenant had a piece of debris sticking out of his thigh. I crawled over to patch him up when I heard it, a sound I can still hear in my sleep. Not a scream, a whimper, high-pitched. Panicked, close. Through the smoke, I saw her. A young girl, couldn't have been more than 9, crouched behind a tipped-over fruit cart. Her arm was bleeding. She was holding a bundle that wasn't moving. I grabbed my med kit and radioed in. Nothing. Static. My CO's voice finally came through, sharp. Negative. Do not approach. Unknown threats. Wait for air support. But I couldn't. I couldn't unsee the blood dripping from her elbow, the way her knees were shaking. So I went, ran across open ground, bullets cracked past my ears like angry gods. My med pack strap got clipped, jerked me sideways, didn't stop. I hit the ground beside her, checked the bundle. A baby. Alive, barely. The girl had a puncture wound in her gut, shrapnel the size of a spoon handle. I applied pressure with one hand while holding her in the other. No cover. No backup, just instincts and training. I wrapped them both in my jacket. And I ran again, 1/2 mile, through smoke, alleyways, broken glass. Found a secondary unit at an outpost screaming for help. They lived, both of them. I didn't. Not really. I passed out the second I got them into the stretcher. Woke up in a triage tent with 2 cracked ribs, a concussion, and 22 stitches. My CO visited. He didn't say thank you. He said, next time wait for the damn order. That day my file got marked. Not heroic, just reckless. Later I found a note on my cot. Plain paper, no name, just 5 words, 2 fewer graves. Thank you. And in the corner, a single fingerprint in dried blood. That was the day I became a ghost. Not because I saved a life, but because I did it without permission. I got 10 days of leave after that. 10 whole days to go home. You'd think after dragging a bleeding child through open fire, I'd have earned a warm welcome, maybe a hug, maybe someone asking, "Are you okay?" But instead, I walked through the same front door I'd grown up in and felt like a guest in a museum where everything had been carefully staged for someone else's life. Mom didn't ask about my tour, didn't ask about the scar curling under my ribs or why I limped up the stairs. She asked if I wanted to borrow her eye cream. Said I looked a little tired. Dad gave me a nod and went back to polishing his golf clubs. Derek didn't even look up from his phone. No one mentioned it was Veterans Day. No one said welcome home. At dinner, they served chicken casserole and conversation that circled around Derek's latest promotion, his new house in Austin, and how his golden retriever, Bailey, was doing obedience training. I sat at the table chewing green beans like they were shards of glass, trying to find a polite place to insert the story of how I pulled a man's femoral artery closed with my bare hands in a Humvee that was upside down. But no opening ever came. When I finally said, "I saved a kid," Mom paused, mid-salad toss, and said, "That's nice, honey, but can we not do war stories at dinner?" Later that night, I laid in the guest room. Same twin bed, same lemon-scented sheets, same blank walls. No photos, no trace of me. I stared at the ceiling and wondered how I could be more seen in a foreign battlefield than in the house where I learned to walk. I thought about the girl, the baby, the blood, and how none of it mattered here, because this house wasn't designed to hold people like me. It was built for Derek's trophies, for engagement announcements and gender reveals, for pretty daughters who wore cardigans and married boys from college. I reached into my duffel and ran my fingers over the folded uniform I hadn't unpacked. It still smelled like adrenaline and desert wind. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake someone and say, "Do you know what I've done, what I've carried, what I've survived?" But I didn't. I just lay there, quiet, still, the way I was trained to do in hostile zones. Because here, at home, the silence wasn't new. It was just more personal. The wedding invite came 2 months later. White cardstock, silver lettering. Derek Reyes and Lauren Bennett cordially invite you. No dear sister, no Jordan, just Sijin. J. Reyes, like my rank was the only way they knew how to place me anymore. And maybe it was. I stared at the envelope for a long time. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I knew exactly what it meant. You're invited, but stay quiet, don't wear the uniform. Don't bring up your past. Don't ruin the photos. So I made a decision. I'd go, but not for them. I arrived in full dress blues, polished boots, hair in a regulation bun, medals pinned right over my heartbeat, not for attention, not as protest, just truth. The venue was some vineyard in Napa, rows of grapevines and white chairs lined in perfect symmetry. Everyone wore beige, lavender, or muted smiles. When I stepped out of the rental car, the valet blinked, said, "Thank you for your service," like he wasn't sure what else to do with a woman in uniform. Inside, the stares started, some subtle, some not. My mother walked over, lips tight, her eyes scanned me top to bottom. "You wore that?" "Didn't see a dress code that excluded national service," I said. She flinched just a little, then whispered, "Let's not make this about you, it's Derek's day." I nodded. Of course. Wouldn't want courage to overshadow a software demo. Dad handed me a glass of champagne. Didn't say a word. Lauren's mom leaned in at one point and said, "So noble what you do." Derek said you're like a nurse? More like a medic who runs through fire with one hand on a tourniquet and the other on a rifle. She turned pale. I smiled politely and walked away. Then, right before the ceremony started, a quiet ripple moved through the crowd. Men in suits, security earpieces, and then he appeared. The President of the United States. He walked straight toward me, held out his hand. "Sergeant Jordan Reyes?" "Yes, sir." He gripped my hand firmly, held it longer than protocol allowed, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You saved more lives than most generals I've served with." "I've read your file. You didn't just serve, you rewrote the field guide for wartime triage." I didn't hear the clink of champagne glasses. I didn't see the frozen stares. I only felt my pulse in my throat and my mother's breath catch behind me. The president smiled at the crowd. That's not just brave, that's genius under fire. And for the first time in my life, everyone saw me, not as a problem, not as the sister in combat boots, but as exactly who I was. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception hall. It was everything you'd expect. Golden string lights, centerpieces that cost more than my rent, a live quartet playing songs no one actually recognized. I kept my distance, sat at a table near the back, watched people avoid eye contact like I was contagious with reality. Then came the family photo. The photographer called for Reyes family, please. I stood, then hesitated. Was about to step back, as I always had, make myself small, unseen. But before I could fade, the photographer looked right at me. Excuse me, ma'am, are you the soldier? We need you in the center. The whole room froze for half a second. I heard forks stop clinking. Mom opened her mouth, maybe to redirect the setup, but then, before she could say anything, the president stepped forward again. Still there, still watching. He smiled and said, I think the most decorated member of this family belongs front and center. Don't you? And just like that, I was standing in the middle of a frame I'd spent my entire life being cropped out of. Click. Later, after the music picked up and people started dancing, I stepped out to the balcony for air. Stars overhead, grapevines stretching in every direction like a map of all the places I'd never fit in. That's when I heard the door open behind me. It was Mom. She walked slowly like her heels weighed more than my boots, stopped beside me. Didn't speak right away, just looked out at the vines like she was afraid to look at me. Then, quiet, almost whispered, she reached out. Her hand touched mine, tentative, trembling. I didn't know, she said. I didn't flinch, didn't fill the silence. Just let it breathe. Then I answered, You never asked. She nodded once, not a breakdown. Not a flood of apologies, just a small, almost imperceptible shift, but it was enough. Because sometimes recognition doesn't come with applause. Sometimes it's just presence. The next morning I packed quietly. No fanfare, no tearful goodbyes, but as I loaded my bag into the rental, my dad walked out. He didn't say much, just placed a travel mug of coffee in my cup holder and gave me a pat on the shoulder. And Derek? He sent a text that simply read, I get it now. I really do. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because some wounds don't need reopening to be acknowledged. And in that moment, for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. I was just leaving, on my own terms. I didn't post the photo. Someone else did. I don't even know who. Maybe a cousin. Maybe the photographer. All I know is that within days it was everywhere. Military Facebook groups, vet forums, even a thread on Reddit titled, The Woman Who Made the President Wait. And suddenly my inbox wasn't silent. Messages came in from women I'd never met. Moms, nurses, reservists. One read, I showed my daughter your story. She said she wants to be strong like you, not pretty. Strong. Another, I'm 22. I just enlisted. My recruiter gave us a link to your field triage video. And another, they told me I was too emotional for combat medicine. After watching what you did, I know better. I didn't cry reading them. I smiled, not big, just enough. It wasn't pride. It was relief, like the parts of me I'd been forced to silence finally had somewhere to land. Then came the one that stopped me cold. It was from an old catering staffer at Derek's wedding. I barely remembered her. But she wrote, You probably didn't notice me, but I watched you the whole night. The way you stood still while others turned away. The way you didn't demand space, but still held it. I just wanted to say, I see you. Thank you. And somehow that message meant more than the president's handshake, because it wasn't scripted. It wasn't ceremony, it was someone real, someone small, someone like me. For years, I'd been begging my family to see me, to listen, to ask. But they weren't the only audience anymore, and when strangers started calling me by name, not by rank, Jordan, not Sergeant Reyes, it hit different. Like the world was finally willing to meet me where I stood, not just salute from afar. I kept teaching, kept showing up at Walter Reed. Still barked at recruits for sloppy bandaging, but something shifted. One of my students, a lanky kid with trembling hands, asked during a break, "Ma'am, are you the one from that rescue video?" "The girl with the baby?" I nodded, he blinked. "Can I shake your hand?" So I did. And he said, "I didn't think someone like me could do what you did, but now I think maybe I can." And I realized, for every person who ignored me at their dinner table, there was someone out here ready to listen. And for the first time, I didn't need to speak louder. I just needed to speak truth. The rest would echo. One night, a few weeks after the wedding, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my dress uniform. It was still folded, sharp. The ribbons still shimmered, even in the low light. The collar still smelled faintly of desert wind and antiseptic. I hadn't worn it since the photo. Hadn't touched it. And yet, it wasn't just fabric anymore. It wasn't a shell I put on to prove something. It wasn't armor, it was me, unapologetic. Undeniable. I ran my fingers over the medals, each one tied to someone's blood, someone's breath, someone's second chance, and I thought about how none of them came with applause. No parades, no speeches, just moments. Moments that rewrote training manuals, that made someone live another day. That mattered. And I realized, sitting there alone, that I didn't need to be in the center of anyone's photo. I didn't need to be mentioned at Thanksgiving, or added to a group text about Derek's latest LinkedIn post. I already existed, fully, powerfully, without their permission. That was the shift. For so long, I'd been trying to get back into a room I never felt welcome in. Trying to earn a seat at a table where my name was written in pencil, easy to erase. But now, I was building my own damn table. With names etched in steel, with seats reserved for those who understood quiet heroism, for people who didn't flinch at blood or at women who didn't shrink themselves to fit polite conversation. The photo from Derek's wedding had gone viral in a few military circles. Someone even made a meme out of it. When you're the only one at the reunion with a purple heart and no one asks how you're doing, I laughed when I saw it, not because it was funny, but because it was true. And sometimes truth is the best kind of punchline. The Pentagon reached out next, not for combat, but for consultation. They wanted me on a task force to redesign battlefield trauma protocols, said my methods saved 40% more lives in some zones. I said yes, not for pride, but for purpose. Because at the end of the day, you don't need a perfect family to build a legacy. You just need the guts to keep going when no one's clapping. And I had that now, not because they finally saw me, but because I stopped needing them to. The classroom at Walter Reed smelled like fresh coffee and bleach, a weird mix of caffeine and control. 20 recruits, all nerves and eager eyes, some barely 20. Some older than I was when I deployed the first time. I stood at the front, arms crossed, watching them fumble with trauma kits, tourniquets twisted wrong, gauze wrapped like someone was decorating a Christmas turkey. One kid dropped his field scissors 3 times in 15 minutes. It was almost funny. Almost. "You think this is pressure?" I said, loud enough to snap their attention. "Try stopping a femoral bleed while someone's screaming your name in a language you don't speak." Silence. Then hustle. I walked between rows, correcting hand positions, tightening knots, realigning priorities. And then it happened. One of the newer recruits, tall, awkward, face still soft from suburban safety, looked up and asked, "Ma'am, are you the medic from that helmet cam video? The one with the girl and the baby?" I stopped, just for a second. "Yeah," I said, "that was me." He blinked like I'd just confirmed Santa was real. You carried them? Through gunfire? Yep, and if you wrap that bandage like that again, you won't make it past Tuesday. The whole class laughed, and I did too. Not politely, not stiffly, a full, real laugh. The kind that shakes loose whatever old weight was still stuck in your ribs. After class, 2 of them stayed behind, said they'd joined the medical track because of that story, that they'd watched it 5 times, that they didn't know someone could be both a medic and a force of nature. I didn't correct them. Because maybe finally I was both, not in theory, not in some framed citation on a wall, but here, in scrubs and boots, with coffee breath and a scar that still tingled when it rained. There was something about teaching, not just procedures, but presence, teaching them how to hold chaos without flinching, how to be the calm in someone else's storm. I wasn't just passing on skills, I was passing on identity. And in those moments, kneeling beside a recruit fumbling with a pressure wrap, I felt more seen than I ever did at any family dinner. Because these kids didn't care if I wore heels. They cared if I could keep someone breathing. And that, to me, was everything. I used to think I needed their approval, my family, their nods, their invitations, their space at the table. But what I needed was to know I wasn't invisible. And funny enough, I found that proof in the most unexpected places. In the 7-year-old who gave me a lollipop after I stopped her bleeding with a belt. In the teenage recruit who whispered, "Ma'am, I didn't think I was strong enough until I met you." In the wife of a soldier I couldn't save, who still sent me a thank you card because I held his hand until the end. They saw me, not as too intense, not as too masculine, not as someone to be corrected or reshaped, but as someone who mattered. Exactly as I was. My family, they'll catch up or they won't. And I've made peace with that, because I've learned something more important. Your worth isn't measured by how loudly people applaud you. It's measured by how quietly you refuse to disappear. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt like the extra in your own family's movie, the black sheep, the one with too much ambition, too many opinions, too much fire, I want you to hear me. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. Enough to rebuild, enough to begin again, enough to walk into a room where no one claps and still know you belong there. You don't need permission to be extraordinary. You don't need your name on the guest list to change the room. You don't need the spotlight to leave a legacy. Sometimes just standing your ground is the bravest kind of brilliance. I'm Jordan Reyes. I've stitched wounds in sandstorms, held dying hands in silence, rewritten protocols that saved people I'll never meet. But more than anything, I've learned how to live loudly, fully, unapologetically, even when no one was watching. And if this story touched something inside you, if it reminded you of your own invisible battles or the moments you felt unseen, tell me. Share your story in the comments. Where are you watching from? What time is it right now? What part hit you hardest? Let's make this more than just my story. Let's make it a space for every soul that's ever been sidelined and every fighter who's still standing. Until next time, stay strong, stay seen, and never wait for permission to become who you already are. What's one moment in your life where you felt completely unseen, even by people who should have known you best? Drop it in the comments. Let's make this space more than a story. Let's make it a mirror for anyone who's ever felt invisible, and a reminder that your voice matters.